Shedding a Little Light, a Miraculous Ladybug fanfiction written and narrated by Christina. Ladybug, watch out! Cat Noir leapt to shield her from the blast, pulling them both into a roll on the ground as they ducked a large shock bolt sent in their direction. Sparks of electricity flashed through the air as strings of lights were ripped from the rooftops overhead and sent into a large knapsack on the villain's back. Cat Noir helped Ladybug scramble back to her feet before launching another attack at the 12-foot-tall villain, only to be blown backwards by the powerful vacuum-like device he was using to suck away every Christmas decoration lining the streets of Paris. Ladybug paused, using her yo-yo as a shield while she studied their seemingly invulnerable opponent. They had already identified the object with the Akuma in it, the pendant hanging from her neck, but there was no way to get close to it without being zapped by the electricity harnessed from the Christmas lights, or being pushed away aside by the suction device, and she didn't want to use Cat Noir's cataclysm on the tiring person unless they absolutely had to. The villain herself was glowing with a brilliance that was almost blinding, and her tall golden figure was a stark contrast to the dark, wintry night. Ladybug glanced back as Cat Noir landed beside her, shaking his head to brush off the snow he'd acquired from landing in a snowbank several yards away. "What's our next move, m'lady?" Before she could answer, there was a flash of light as the villain erupted in a massive swirling glow before disappearing from view. "What was that?" Cat Noir exclaimed, while Ladybug motioned for him to follow her as they headed up to the roof to get a better view. They peered out against the softly falling snow, but the villain was nowhere to be seen. Ladybug frowned as she scanned the streets cautiously. Where'd she go? Her eyes caught sight of a frayed power line that was dangling in place of where the villain had last been. She must be able to travel through power cords, too. M'lady, are those lights real, or is this just a filament of my imagination?" Ladybug raised an eyebrow, knowing he was trying to make a pun, but sometimes his vocabulary was more expansive than hers. She turned to face the direction he was pointing in, and her eyes widened at the sight of a large yellow castle, flaming with the radiance of hundreds and thousands of brightly colored light bulbs strung across every inch of it. Oh, so that's what he was talking about. Dreaming of a bright Christmas, kitty? She swung out her yo-yo and pulled herself in the direction of the towers, but caught a glimpse of his grin as Cat Noir followed closely behind her. They neared the entrance, and a voice called out to them from somewhere on the walls above. "If you dare to enter, you will be delighted, I'm sure, but unfortunately we don't carry any lights with us," Cat Noir shot back. His easy smile belied the ready stance of his staff, and he turned to Ladybug, nodding subtly in the direction of his hand. The villain may be a person, but the castle certainly was not. She nodded in agreement, and he quickly charged the castle gates. Cataclysm! The dazzling light faded as the massive structure dissolved into pieces, and Ladybug quickly wrapped her yo-yo around the villain, using a nearby crane for leverage as the shining being started tumbling out of the now empty sky. There was a violent jerk as the yo-yo pulled tight, the weight of the large villain settling against the strands, keeping it suspended in midair. Ladybug grimaced with effort as she strained to hold the villain steady, knowing Cat Noir was about to make a jump for the pendant holding the Akuma. A loud shriek of frustration pierced the night, and before she realized what was happening, a current of electricity raced along the string connecting them, the force of the impact causing Ladybug to fly backwards and smash into the wall across the street. Ladybug blinked blearily as her eyes struggled to make sense of the smoky haze surrounding her. Her throat was dry and her head seemed to spin as fiery sensations pierced her arms and legs, and she could feel herself growing faint. A dark shape came into focus as Cat Noir hovered over her, fearful concern lining his face. "Ladybug, are you okay?" Ladybug pressed a hand against her head and nodded as she struggled to get to her feet, grabbing onto his shoulder for balance, but he gently pushed her back to lean against the building, his eyes intense with worry. "You were just electrocuted by extreme volts of energy. You're lucky not to have any burdens, let alone be alive. You can't go back into the fight like this." Ladybug took a deep breath as she felt the effects fading and her vision steadily cleared. "Thanks, kitty, but I actually almost feel better already. These magic suits are miraculous after all." She tried to give him a reassuring smile, but he pulled her into a fierce hug before he had a chance to see it, and she could feel him trembling slightly. Let's not let that happen again, okay? She hugged him back and felt him relax a bit. Okay. She gave him a comforting squeeze and shifted away, bringing her yo-yo out between them. What do you say we press charges? Cat Noir smirked as she flung the magical weapon up into the sky. Lucky charm. Thanks to many years of being reminded by her parents, Ladybug knew exactly what to do with the large pounds of baking soda her lucky charm had provided. With a little help from the fire department, they were able to get the threat of being electrocuted under control. She watched as Cat Noir leapt up and swiped the pendant off, quickly smashing it to the ground, causing a akumatized victim to shrink until she was completely buried in the surrounding foam. Ladybug wasn't sure how breathable that would be, so she quickly hurled the empty sacks into the air. Miraculous Ladybug! The darkened streets lit up as glittering strands of lights returned to the houses, and the smoldering fires were replaced by crystal white snow reflecting the colorful shine of the buildings. The mountain of foam began to disappear, and the firefighters started heading back to the station, leaving Cat Noir and Ladybug to tend to the victim. The last bits of foam faded away, and the two heroes exchanged a look of surprise, as in its place knelt a small elderly lady, her shoulders slightly hunched as she wrapped a shawl closer about herself and peered bewilderedly around her environment. Ladybug caught a glimpse of Silver lying in the snow and carefully scooped it up before quickly stepping over to her, laying a gentle hand on the woman's shoulder as she crouched down to her level. I think this belongs to you. The woman's eyes lit up in recognition as she gratefully took the pendant and slipped it back around her neck. Why, yes it does, thank you, She paused, her face growing worried. Ladybug? Cat Noir? Ladybug smiled encouragingly, but the woman's eyes filled with realization and she gasped in horror. Was I akumatized? Her small hands flew to her mouth and she tucked her head in shame. I'm so sorry. Please say I didn't hurt either of you. Ladybug sensed Cat Noir stiffen slightly from where he stood behind her. He replied gently, Don't worry. The miraculous ladybugs have already fixed everything, and it's not your fault Monarch keeps taking advantage of people in distress. He knelt down beside them and stared caringly into the old woman's face. What brought all this about? The woman's gaze shifted to the glowing decorations covering the buildings, their twinkling reflections shining in her eyes as they filled with unshed tears. She lowered her head and her voice was soft as she answered. Christmas hasn't felt like Christmas to me in years. I don't have anyone nearby to help me set things up, and I'm too short and tired to do it myself, so I guess when I saw how beautiful all those other houses looked, it just made me feel... Her voice broke off, and she took a deep breath before hurriedly wiping a hand across her eyes. Anyway, that's no excuse to work with that traitor Monarch. I won't let him get to me again, Ladybug. Ladybug looked to Cat Noir and saw the same sympathy and sadness she felt for the poor woman. The streets were quiet as the light from the lamppost above them seemed to draw them into a protective circle, the ground flickering with gentle glints of shimmering colors, and despite the snow that fell softly about them, the air was almost warm and still, without a hint of wind. Cat Noir leaned closer with a knowing smile on his face, and his eyes twinkled with playful excitement. Want to know a secret? The former victim blinked in surprise, then nodded curiously. What's your name, dear lady? The woman chuckled slightly, spreading delicate wrinkles further across her cheeks and crinkling merrily around the corners of her eyes. Monique. Cat Noir smiled back at her and bowed his head in acknowledgement. Well, Miss Monique, I'm about to tell you something that I haven't even told Ladybug yet. Ladybug lifted her eyes slightly as her partner sent her a quick wink. He settled into a seat on the ground, idly tracing a clawed finger in the snow as his voice grew softer and he seemed half lost in a memory. My dad hates this time of year. He says it's all a marketing scam and a ploy for people to fake being nice just so they can get what they want in return. It took my mom years to convince him to let us celebrate and decorate for Christmas. When I was very little, it didn't matter as much since I didn't know any better. But one night, when I was about 6 years old, I came home from a party my friend had invited me to, and when I walked into the empty hall, all the joy and excitement I had felt while I was basking in the wonders of a glamorous party and decorations suddenly faded, and I was hit with a feeling of loneliness and despair. It seemed silly, even at the time, to be bothered about those things, as I'd always been perfectly happy without them, and I knew even my friend wasn't happy just because she had those things. But I remember walking through my dark, cold bedroom and staring out into the glowing streets, and crying because somehow every other house seemed to be filled with warmth and light except mine. Ladybug's heart ached as she pictured a little boy standing by a window all alone, and glanced over to see the woman listening attentively as well. Cat Noir smiled slightly, his eyes misting a bit as he continued. I didn't notice her at first, but my mom came up behind me and scooped me in a hug, and I told her what was bothering me. At first, she looked sad too, but then she told me to follow her and led me up to her adventure room, which I wasn't normally allowed to go into. He seemed to notice the confused looks I gave him, so he quickly amended. It was a room where she kept lots of her favorite souvenirs from trips and equipment and stuff. There was a large bed in it too, with a skylight directly over it, which is what she led me to. We both lay down on it and stared up at the ceiling, which was pretty low, making the stars feel even closer. Once we were there, he paused, then shifted to stand up. Actually, never mind what she told me. I want to show you something. Ladybug glanced up in surprise, awkwardly shifting to a standing position as Cat Noir helped the woman to her feet. He seemed to ask her something, and the lady nodded in agreement while Cat Noir readied his staff. "You coming, Albie?" he asked, shooting her a cheeky grin, and she realized she'd been staring blankly at him and was still frozen in place. Ladybug shook her head with an exasperated smile as she quickly pulled herself after them, followed Cat Noir up to the roof of a tall building nearby, blushing slightly as she remembered this was where he had prepared his special surprise for her the night Glass Eater attacked. She was glad for the cover of darkness and the mild sting of the cool air to excuse the redness in her cheeks, and swiftly turned her attention back to Cat Noir, who had led the woman up to stand against the railing and had begun talking again as they looked out over the brightened streets. Even though I appreciate colorful decorations, I was mostly sad because I felt like it showed my father didn't care about me, and that everyone else had something special, but I didn't. I don't think it was the lights that were bothering you. It was the feeling of being insignificant and missing out. Like the whole world was having a beautiful party and you weren't invited. But you aren't forgotten, and the whole purpose of Christmas is to prove that. He gestured grandly over the handrail. They may have all those flashy store-bought lights, but you and I have something far more special. The woman followed his finger as he directed her gaze upwards, causing Ladybug to glance curiously up as well, then gasp in awe as she realized why Cat Noir had brought them here. A large patch of clouds had been cleared away, revealing a midnight sky filled with shimmering stars that twinkled in the moonlight. The three stood quietly for a moment, soaking in the beauty and wonder of the handiwork before them. Then Cat Noir turned to the woman with an earnest smile. Christmas is the story of how light came to conquer darkness and bring warmth and peace, not just to all people, but to you specifically. And whenever you see a glimpse of starlight, you can remember that one who hung the stars knows you by name, and each one is a reminder that you are seen and known and loved. A small tear slipped down her cheek as Monique tugged her shawl closer to her heart, her face lighting up with a grateful smile. That is a beautiful perspective to hold on to. You're a very wise young hero. Ladybug gave a subtle nod of agreement while Cat Noir shifted shyly. I can't really take credit for it. I'm just passing along what my mother told me. Well, you're a very wise son to listen to her, the woman said definitively, patting him lightly on the shoulder. He smiled appreciatively, then lifted his hand to his ring as his Miraculous let out a warning beep. Whoops, better get you home. Where do you live? Ladybug's eyes wandered to the darkened shutters as they walked up the path to the lady's house. It's been a while since I watched the stars so closely, and that ride was the most fun I've had in years. Monique chuckled as she readjusted her shawl after the elaborate leap Cat Noir had used to carry her out of the sky. Ladybug hid a smile as she watched her partner rub his neck sheepishly. He really did know how to leave a dramatic impression on someone. I'm glad you enjoyed it, Miss Monique. You're a really special person, and I hope the stars are a good reminder of that, since even when you can't see them, they're always there, the woman finished with a smile. Thank you, Cat Noir. I now have no doubt that I shall enjoy my Christmas in peace without any chance of Monarch akumatizing me again. Ladybug pauses near the gate to the woman's small yard. Still, perhaps there is something we can still do for you. Do you have any Christmas decorations on hand? Monique's eyes widened, but she quickly shook her head with a small smile. You've both done so much for me already. There's no need for you to do any more. It would be our pleasure, Miss Monique, Cat Noir put in, and Ladybug nodded affirmingly. Once we recharge our kwamis, we can put up any decorations you'd like. With our superpowers, it won't take us long at all. We can also take them down for you, too, when the season is over, Cat Noir added with a wink. Ladybug nodded, grateful her partner had thought of the repercussions that might follow her quickly thought-out plan. I don't know what to say. I don't want to trouble you. It would be no trouble at all. We insist, Ladybug declared, crossing her arms with playful defiance. The woman's face broke out into a wide smile. Well, thank you. I would love that. I have the boxes all ready to go. Ladybug and Cat Noir shared a cheerful smile and followed Monique up the steps to her small house. Monique paused at the door and glanced at Cat Noir uncertainly. I do have a dog. Is that going to make trouble for you? Cat Noir stared at her blankly, and Ladybug let out a light laugh as she replied, Don't worry, my cat plays well with others. Cat Noir tilted his head and sent her a dry look, but couldn't hide his smile as she affectionately tousled the hair between his cat ears. Monique smiled too. Well, in that case, come in. You've both been out in the cold long enough. The second she opened the door, they were met with a flurry of gray and white as a little dog bounded over to them and started yipping and barking around the woman's legs expectantly. Monique laughingly scooped the dog up, and Ladybug couldn't resist running a hand over its soft, curly fur as they followed the woman inside. No one lives here but Foo-Foo and me, so you can both find a room to de-transform in and take as long as you need before going back outside. The heroes nodded in thanks and quickly slipped into different rooms as their transformations wore off, then set to work after feeding the kwamis with some snacks Monique had offered them. Milady, have I ever mentioned how you light up my world? Cat Noir remarked with a knowing grin as he passed another string of lights up for Ladybug to string along the edges of the low rooftop. Ladybug rolled her eyes, though a fond smile threatened to break through as she struggled to keep a neutral expression on her face. What, too tacky for you? He added, passing another thumbtack to hold the lights in place. Ladybug burst out laughing and shook her head as she accepted a tack from his outstretched hand. You're something else, Kitty. As in heroically charming and perfect to a fault. Ladybug leaned over and flicked his bell playfully. More like little Foo-Foo using anything as an excuse to get more attention. Cat Noir threw his free hand to his chest in mock offense as he bounced on the staff he'd extended up as a ladder. Youch! Comparing me to a little dog after my heart-filled compliment of you, milady? That's cold. He climbed onto the roof and took a seat next to her as she placed the last tack in place. Sorry, that was a little mean, Ladybug admitted sheepishly, straightening back into a sitting position beside him and bumping his shoulder with hers reassuringly. You're way more sophisticated than any dog, or cat too, for that matter. Cat Noir nodded in satisfaction, but his teasing smirk softened as Ladybug went on. That was really nice, what you did for Miss Monique. And I hope you know that you're a really special and wonderful person too, Cat Noir. He stared at her in wonder for a moment, as if to soak in every ounce of her words, then glanced shyly away, a small smile passing across his face. Thanks, Ladybug. You're a really wonderful person too. They settled into a comfortable silence, just as Cat Noir's ring started beeping incessantly. Ladybug looked at him with a wry smirk. You just had to cataclysm that tree branch, didn't you? Cat Noir raised his hands defensively. It could have fallen on the power lines, and then all this would be for nothing, not to mention dangerous. Ladybug shook her head, biting back a laugh as they made their way back onto the ground. And I told you, it was nowhere near the power lines, and it was so tiny it would probably just fall off if it did. Still, better safe than sorry, I guess, she relented, stepping back as they surveyed their work. They stopped inside to say goodbye to Miss Monique, who thanked them profusely, and made their way down the small walkway and back onto the street. May I walk you home? Ladybug raised an eyebrow, and Cat Noir chuckled as he shifted nervously. Sorry, I guess I just don't want to lose your company yet. Ladybug's gaze softened, and she shrugged agreeably. We can walk to the center of town and split up from there. He grinned. Sounds good to me. The streets were especially quiet as the softly falling snow blanketed the ground, and most people were still sleepy in their houses. The lampposts cast a rosy glow about the two heroes as they made their way through the city, but something seemed slightly out of place. Have you ever noticed how there are a lot of houses on the street that never put up Christmas lights? Ladybug remarked, turning her head to stare curiously at the unmarked buildings lining the sidewalk. I always assumed they were just little old Grinches, but what if they want to put up decorations and just can't? Cat Noir nodded thoughtfully, then brightened. Hey, maybe we could do something for them just like we did for Miss Monique. Ladybug's eyes widened with excitement as an idea began to form in her mind. There's still 3 weeks before Christmas. What if we organize a special Christmas service project? Set up lights, do some yard work. Maybe we could even open it up to the community so anyone who wants to could volunteer. We won't be able to help everyone, of course, but maybe once we get it going, the mayor and city council will back us. And even if we only help one extra person, it would still be worth it, right? Totally. Their smiles faded, though, as they walked past another house, its paint chipped and peeling, while the shutters were battered and hanging at an odd angle. The remnants of an overgrown garden peeked out from the piles of snow lining the yard, and a shiny safety banister was the only thing that seemed to still be in good care. Most probably got rid of their decorations a long time ago, or never had any to begin with, Ladybug said sadly, her eyes wandering to the darkened windows before hardening with a new resolve. While we can't fix everything for them, we could still brighten things up a bit and help it feel a little more like Christmas. The main thing we'll need is lights. I can get the lights, Cat Noir said suddenly. Ladybug glanced at him skeptically. What are you gonna do, rob a store? Cat Noir raised his head airily. I have my ways, just leave it to me. He bowed with a mysterious grin, while Ladybug stared at him in amazement and disbelief, before slipping into an acceptant smile. If you say so, but you know we'll probably need thousands of them. They resumed walking, and Ladybug's pace quickened as more ideas started flooding her head, and the former excitement returned to her heart. You know what would make it doubly festive? Cookies! What says love and care like a Christmas cookie? Plus, it'd be nice to have a treat for the workers, too, assuming anyone would join. And I know of a way to get a bunch of them. We could bring some to every house we work on, and that way both the inside and outside of the house will have a little extra Christmas cheer. Cat Noir's eyes brightened at the mention of food. I know I would definitely appreciate that. This is going to be the best Christmas project ever. Ladybug suppressed a laugh as she noticed Cat Noir's steps becoming more like half skips with this growing enthusiasm. Once people know superheroes are helping, I'm sure it won't take long for them to join. With our powers, we could set most things up ourselves in no time at all. Ladybug brushed a finger to her earring subconsciously. Well, normally it seems unfair to use our superhero status to get a response from people. But, Cat Noir finished. This is exactly what superheroes should be doing, helping the city. And it makes sense to encourage other people to get involved as well. Ladybug nodded in agreement, and the two chatted happily about the strategies they would use for organizing workdays and figuring out which houses to start on, before saying goodnight and parting ways, eager to set things up for the coming Christmas project. Marinette could barely contain her excitement as she added the last box of cookies to the small wagon she had occasionally used for deliveries, and quickly slipped out into the back alley behind the Dupin chain bakery. You're really on a roll today, Marinette, Tiki remarked, her little head poking up from the purse hanging at Marinette's side. You know you still have well over 15 minutes before you have to be at the park. Marinette smiled sheepishly as she wrapped the scarf around her neck and tightened her coat in case she had to transform out in the cold. I know, Tiki, but this is one thing I can't be late for. Ladybug is supposed to be the one organizing this thing. I don't want people to go home if I'm not there. Plus, it will give me a chance to meet with Cat Noir before anyone else shows up. She gave Tiki an affectionate tickle before glancing around and exclaiming, Tiki, spot's on. Ladybug pulled the small unmarked wagon up to the park and realized Cat Noir was already waiting for her. A large stack of crates filled with bundles of Christmas lights set up beside him on one of the benches. Ladybug's jaw dropped as she saw yet another stack of crates lined up on the other side of him. He hopped up to greet her and smiled expectantly. Do you think it'll be enough for all the houses we're going to today? Ladybug continued to stare at the crates, then back at him in astonishment. Enough? This is perfect. We could set up a whole street like this, but how did you... Don't tell me you bought all this. Cat Noir appeared flustered for a moment, then quickly waved away her concern with a smile, but his eyes still glanced about uneasily. Of course not. I got them from Adrian Agreste. Ladybug's eyes widened even more. Not that I know him super well, of course, Cat Noir added hurriedly, his hand rubbing behind his neck in a nervous fashion. But I've run into him a few times, and I knew we needed someone rich to supply the amount of lights we would need. So he seemed like the right person to ask, and he was more than happy to help. Ladybug gave a soft sigh as she felt her hands instinctively clasped above her heart. Of course he was. He's so gorgeous. I mean, generous, she blurted as she saw confusion flicker across her partner's face. It was really generous of him to provide all those lights, and you were right to ask him. Ladybug scolded herself inwardly. She was trying to just be a friend to Adrian. Her heart was way too overloaded to be worrying about relationships right now. Besides, the boy wasn't even here. The last thing she wanted to do was hurt Cat Noir's feelings by letting him figure out who his competition is. Wait, did that mean she was considering Cat Noir's... No! Sure, he was brave, kind, and thoughtful, not to mention funny, and he had been acting more gentlemanly lately. What was she thinking? She was just friends with everybody. Ladybug bit back a muffled scream and squeezed a smile on her face, hoping to disguise her momentary inner turmoil. Cat Noir tilted his head slightly, but then relaxed and added, Maybe we should keep it a secret, so only you and I know about it, though, since he's not one to attach his name to things, and his father might not be too pleased if he found out. Ladybug's face grew worried. You mean his father doesn't know? What if Adrian gets himself into trouble because of it? Cat Noir shook his head appeasingly. He can't really get in trouble for it. It's his own money. But his father isn't too big on Christmas and might scold him for not investing in more substantial things. He lifted a strand from one of the boxes proudly. This isn't just any strand of lights, though. I made sure he ordered solar lights, so it won't cost people any extra after we put them up. Ladybug's eyes lit up excitedly, and she gave him a quick squeeze. You really think of everything, Kitty. That's brilliant. She pulled away and started examining the other boxes, finding they were sorted into whites, multicolored, and flashing variations. People are definitely going to love this. Not as much as I love these, Cat Noir mumbled through a mouthful of cookie. Ladybug hurried back to the wagon and closed the box before he could swipe any more. Those are for later, and that was from a gift box, not a worker's box. Couldn't you gift one to me? Cat Noir asked, widening his kitten eyes pitifully. It would still have plenty left for everyone else. He glanced down at the small wagon heaping with red and green wrapped boxes strapped carefully on with cords, and he seemed to do a quick count of just how many there were. Wow, you really would have plenty. You must be a really talented baker to make all these yourself. Ladybug chuckled nervously, watching her hands practically spasm in wild gestures as she tried to explain herself. What? Me make cookies? Ha! No, they're from Marinette. Marinette? Cat Noir repeated, a hint of awe filling his voice. Ladybug shrugged dismissively. Yeah, her parents often have extra ingredients left over, and she had extra time yesterday, so... She gestured to the pile of cookies laid out between them. When I asked if she could make some cookies for the project, she was more than happy to offer her services. Cat Noir stared down at them with a newfound respect. That's enough to feed everybody 10. Marinette is so amazing, he added softly, tracing a hand over one of the tastefully wrapped boxes. Ladybug clasped the back of her arm with an awkward smile. Yeah, Marinette is amazing. Cat Noir grinned back at her, his former enthusiasm causing his eyes to sparkle in the afternoon light. You're amazing too, Ladybug. You have such a big heart for others, and with a determination to fight for them. And thanks to you, this project idea is going to help a lot of people. Thanks to you too, Kitty. You were the one who started all this. Cat Noir playfully lifted a finger to his chin with mock thoughtfulness. You know, actually, I think the benevolent monarch is the one we have to thank for starting it, since we never would have met Monique if he hadn't gifted his Akuma to her. Huh, Ladybug scoffed indignantly. This soon turned into true giggles as she pictured the stern-faced man watching in horror as his plan backfired, bemoaning the fact he'd accidentally caused some Christmas cheer. I bet he'd be really mad if he ever found that out. Cat Noir snickered before puffing out his chest importantly. Yeah, I guess we should spare him the misery and keep all the credit to ourselves. Ladybug shook her head in an attempt to regain her composure as she saw the first groups of people starting to line up. Let's just say it was meant to be. At first, Ladybug found it a bit intimidating how so many strangers and adults looking to her for direction. But her inner designer rose to the challenge, and Cat Noir helped things run smoothly every step of the way, often settling disputes before they could even start. It wasn't long before they fell into predictable rhythm, just as they did when they were fighting supervillains. And once word started going around, volunteers started coming from all over to help Ladybug and Cat Noir decorate houses for those who couldn't do it for themselves. Cat Noir landed in his bedroom and quickly closed the window to keep the winter chill from slipping inside. Closet. Adrien tossed a piece of cheese to Plague, who ate it up greedily, and plopped onto his bed, thoroughly exhausted after the long day, but satisfied with all the work they'd been able to accomplish. He reached a hand over to the box he'd brought with him. He pulled out one of the treasured items and began carefully nibbling on a brightly colored sugar cookie, which held a slight hint of fruit. He closed his eyes as he leaned back against his pillow and sighed contentedly, savoring the sweetness and making an effort to enjoy every crumb. He still felt a little bad about taking a cookie from the wrong box the day of the first project meeting, but Ladybug had assured him she was planning on giving him one of the gift ones anyway, and he was more than happy to claim that box as his. Since then, she'd been sure to set aside a box for him to take home after every Christmas work meeting, and it never ceased to amaze him how something so small could taste so good. And of course, Marinette was the one he really had to thank for it. She's so amazing. Plague popped up with a sly grin from where he was hovering near the foot of Adrien's bed. Who? The girl of your heart or the girl of your stomach? Adrien picked up a sock the Kwame had left conveniently beside his pillow and chucked it at him before rolling his eyes with a smile. Stop it, Plague. You know Marinette means way more to me than that. Do you, though? The Kwame mumbled as he defiantly shoved the sock atop his head to wear as a hat. What was that? Nothing. Adrien stared suspiciously at him for a moment before closing up the cookie box and settling back against the pillows. I wish there was something I could do to thank her. It's been almost 2 weeks and we've had 6 project days so far. And every time Marinette has supplied us with dozens of cookies and treats that she baked all by herself. She's always so thoughtful and generous, and I have no idea how she manages to tackle such a big task all by herself. Plague groaned. I know, you go on about it every night you eat those cookies. Adrien shot him a look, then sprang up as an idea came to him. Hey, what if I went over to help her next time as a thank you and let her know how much I appreciate it? Plague tilted his head doubtfully. Have you forgotten that Ladybug was the one to tell you Marinette was involved? What if she wanted to keep it a secret just like you did? That would either make you look very suspicious or make Cat look like a blabbermouth. Adrian just patted his head consolingly. You worry too much, Plague. I wouldn't go as Adrian, of course. I'd go as Cat Noir. He tucked his hands behind his head and laid back with a satisfied smile. Plague sighed in exasperation. Are you sure you want to be transformed all day again? Couldn't you just write her a note or something? Adrian shrugged. Sorry, buddy, but sometimes actions speak louder than words, and with a product this big, I'm sure she could use some help. Besides, I'll make sure to give you plenty of extra cheese when we get home. Plague opened his mouth to protest again, but Adrian crossed his arms knowingly. And don't act like a little martyr either. Last time I was with her, Tiki assured me that you are just as comfortable inside the suit as outside, so there's no need to make a big fuss about it. Of course she would say that, Plague muttered before finally relenting. Okay, fine, but don't say I didn't warn you. He sniffed and shoved his head deeper into the sock as he curled up beside Adrian's pillow, then peeked out as he added, Good night, Adrian. Good night, Plague. Adrian chuckled softly to himself as he watched the stubborn little Kwame twist around in his makeshift sleeping bag before tucking himself under the covers too, with thoughts of cream and vanilla and soft blue eyes swimming around his head as he fell asleep. Thanks for listening. I know it's been a super long time since I finally made another video, but I hopefully have a bunch more stories coming soon, including the second part of this one. So hopefully that'll be coming out either later this week or early next week. And yes, this was supposed to be a Christmas series story, but I'm just very happy that it's coming out in January because that seems pretty close to me. It'll just be an extended Christmas or a super early Christmas story if you want to see it that way. But yeah, it's never too late to celebrate, right? I also wanted to remind you that you are known and seen and loved by the one who holds the stars, and that's really special. You're not forgotten, and the hope of Christmas is for you too. I know I'm being kind of vague about that, so if you're interested in knowing what I'm talking about, feel free to check the description or leave a comment. And you can always feel free to leave a comment because I love hearing from you. Hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.